Well, this was unexpected. That viral tenant that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Elizabeth Hirschhorn, who's been living rent-free in a Brentwood mansion for the past 570 days, has just moved out. And this wasn't some friendly move-out situation either. The police literally escorted her out of this place and into her moving truck. Okay, so it's one of those Scott from the future moments. So I recorded this video yesterday and I'm finishing the editing and uploading this morning. And I just noticed one thing that I want to share with you guys just to kind of cover myself. Okay, so apparently this tenant Elizabeth is now threatening the landlord, saying that the police did not escort her out of this unit. She's basically saying that she left all on her own, and since the landlord is saying that police escorted her off the property, that's going to be a defamation claim. I don't want some defamation claim myself, so let's just put it this way. I don't know if the police escorted her off the property or not. Everything in this video is just a collection of my opinions and different random news stories that I read, so take it all with a grain of salt. Still a fascinating story. Let's get back to the video. If you guys missed the last video I did on this story a couple weeks ago, long story short, we've got a guy named Sasha Jovanik who lives in this multi-million-dollar Brentwood home. A couple of years ago, Sasha decided to rent out his guest house to a lady named Elizabeth Hirschhorn on a midterm lease through Airbnb. And just months after Elizabeth moved in, she stopped paying rent on her unit, claiming that there was an unpermitted shower and there were some other issues with the guest house. And here we are like a year and a half later, and this lady has still been living in this guest house, basically squatting, living there completely rent-free. Because of California's more laid-back laws around situations like this, the landlord's hands have been tied. He hasn't been able to kick this lady out. Those days are gone though. Elizabeth is out, and Sasha can finally go back to having some kind of normalcy on his property. Now, for anybody who saw my last video or who's been following this story, you're probably feeling the same way that I am about all this, and that is that I'm kind of shocked that she actually left. I thought that she would be squatting here for way longer. I mean, the tenant kind of seemed to actually have the upper hand here because allegedly there was a bunch of issues with the unit that she was living in, which the landlord obviously would be required to fix, but the landlord couldn't get inside the unit to fix those issues because the tenant wouldn't let him in. So it was kind of this unique cycle that they were stuck in, which is, I think, ultimately what led this tenant to be in a position where she was able to stay here for so long for free. To me, it's pretty obvious that the landlord was the victim here. I mean, he said he was scared for his life. He was living in the main house here with his 2 kids and just constantly thinking about the fact that he had someone living on his property that he didn't want there. There's no doubt that there's crappy landlords out there who don't treat their tenants the way that they should, but I really don't believe that this guy was one of them. Another crazy factor here is that this tenant Elizabeth was basically a pro at this. There's several situations documented over the course of the past like 10 or 20 years of her doing very similar things to prior landlords. One of her past landlords named Alex Letwin, she got into a mess like this with out in the Bay Area. She's also documented to be in this legal battle with American Express over a $19,000 unpaid credit card bill. You get the point. It was honestly really surprising to me to even hear that she voluntarily moved out of this house. She's officially out though, and how this all went down as far as I can tell is that Elizabeth actually hired movers to move out of the house. The movers showed up, entered the guest house. The landlord noticed the movers enter the guest house and he thought that they were breaking in or they were up to no good. So he called the cops and was like, "Hey cops, there's 3 random guys in my guest house. You need to come investigate what's happening here." The cops came out and they realized that there was nothing bad going on, but then they decided to stick around and just oversee the whole move out. We'll talk about where this tenant ended up here in a minute, but first I want to give you guys my theory on why Elizabeth finally caved and decided to move out of this place. Okay, so shout out to the Daily Mail and their journalists and their photographers and their paparazzis and basically everyone from the Daily Mail who covered this story because they have more photos and more information on this story than anyone else. I want to show you guys just a couple of things real quick. Sorry about all the ads that are popping up. I really probably should have like an ad blocker or something. If you have any recommendations, let me know because these ads are so annoying. But I want to show you guys is just a couple of photos on how they put this whole story together. So here's a shot of her just walking out of the guest house. Here's one of her walking up to her car. wearing a mask. We got another shot of her pumping gas. Here's these two guys that I'm assuming she hired as her moving crew. I think this one here in the middle is actually wearing a Steelers hat. I'm from Pittsburgh. Go Steelers. This is cool. So we can actually see the guest house, which before we didn't have any shots of. There's a bunch of police officers in here. You can see there is the tenant wearing her mask in the middle, and it's a small space. I don't know. Maybe it's a studio or a one bedroom at the biggest. Here's a drone shot looking down at the garage in the guest house, which is back in this section right here. I read that the landlord Sasha said there was drones flying over his house basically constantly for the past 2 weeks. Pretty small moving truck. It's kind of weird to think that like all of her life possessions can just fit into this one little van. But these photos go on and on. Like I was telling you guys, Daily Mail's legit. So they got a shot of the bedroom inside of the guest house. Check out those views. Here's the bathroom and shower. Pretty wild tile back in that shower. And then I think this is a view from the guest house patio looking over at the main house. And this just shows us how close this tenant was to her landlord. Like he lived up these stairs and in that door. This was his swimming pool in his backyard. So they were basically living on top of each other. Moving on to the second article I want to show you guys. This is the one that I think highlights why she finally decided to just move out on her own before a judge ordered her to move out or anything like that. So this one is called Exclusive. Serial squatter Elizabeth is spotted on dinner date with mystery man just hours after locksmith was seen at the home she has refused to leave. So this article is from October 20th, so it's a couple weeks ago or whatever, and it just goes to show that they basically turned this lady into a celebrity. They had paparazzis who were following her around. Check this out. Okay, so we have this picture. Here's the tenant on the right. Here's some guy. It says, serial squatter has been spotted on a dinner date with a mystery man in Santa Monica, California. This picture says, the 55-year-old was spotted sitting opposite her date who sported a salmon pink shirt, khaki pants, and stylish black glasses. The captions on these photos are hilarious. They left the restaurant together and got into the same car, after which the unidentified date drove Hirschhorn back to the rental she's still living in. Look at this one. The pair looked relaxed in each other's company, with Hirschhorn wearing a black top and jeans, at one point throwing her head back in laughter. Here, the pair got into the same car, after which the unidentified date drove Hirschhorn back to the rental she's still living in. Ooh, she doesn't look happy about this picture. This says, the scriptwriter moved into the guest house of Sasha's Brentwood home in September 2021, where she's still living. So you guys get the point. This is my theory. These paparazzis and people out in LA were basically following this tenant so closely and treating her as if she was like Brad Pitt or something, taking pictures of her on dinner dates, taking pictures of her pumping her gas. And after everyone reported on this, everybody knows where she lives, so there's constantly people outside of her house, there's constantly drones flying above her house. I bet you at some point she was finally just like, okay, whatever, I surrender, I'm sick of all this attention, it's nice to be living in a mansion rent-free, but I need to get myself out of this house and out of the spotlight. Okay, so Elizabeth is officially out, but where did she go? Well, according to several reports, she's staying at an extended stay hotel somewhere in downtown Los Angeles, but for obvious reasons, nobody gave the address, and I don't think I'd even feel comfortable sharing that here either, even if I did know it. What I can't believe, though, is that anybody out there in the Los Angeles area was willing to actually rent to this lady, knowing that she's got a pretty well-documented history of scamming landlords. Since she moved out of Brentwood, the New York Post reported that she did leave that guest house infested with flies and smelling really bad, but let's be honest, that's the least of the landlord's worries at this point. He's obviously changed the locks. He and his attorney basically assumed that Elizabeth has abandoned the property, so he changed the locks that way if she does come back, she's not going to be able to get back in. What's crazy though is that when the landlord's attorney contacted the tenant's attorney to say, hey, we changed the lock on the house, she actually told him that he jumped the gun by changing the locks and said that they have no authority to change the locks or to assume abandonment of the property. It's pretty obvious at this point that from the tenant's standpoint, she probably just wants to collect that $100,000 fee for being wrongfully evicted from her unit. And from the landlord's standpoint, he doesn't owe her any money. She owes him a bunch of money for those 570 something days that she didn't pay him rent. Sadly for the landlord, this whole saga is probably not over. I'm guessing it's going to carry on for months or maybe even years from this point forward before it's like finally settled. But at least he's going to be able to sleep better at night knowing that he doesn't have such a hostile person living literally on his property. That's a wrap for today's episode. Let me know what you guys think about all of this down in the comments. I'll see you next time.